the men and women who signed up to serve our country are some of our best, and for them to be shot down somewhere in Iran, be searching for them, not knowing how that's going to go out. But definitely thoughts and prayers go out to everyone involved. It's dangerous work. But all this stuff of like, hey, if you go to war with Iran, they're going to close the Strait of Hormuz is like pretty predictable. Is because prices have been increasing by a lot and wages have not nearly kept pace or anywhere close. And if you zoom out even longer, if you zoom out to like the last 40 years, that has been a story for like 40 years.
I don't know anyone that just has hundreds of thousands of dollars just sitting somewhere unless they get handed to them from family. Not everyone has just a 20% to throw down on a five, six, seven, $800,000 home.
I just think it should be illegal in this country to have a full-time job and still be in poverty, like to the point where you're getting government assistance like that, especially for companies who are earning a whole bunch of profit every year. That's just, I mean, that's socialism, but it's socialism for the corporation where they're getting government benefits to pay for their workers. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Two Dudes and a Pup. We do have a pup in the room today. She may make an appearance, she may not, but it has been another wild week. And just for everyone watching this, I just want you all to know Isaac and I do connect throughout the week what is going on in the world, and we try to actually prep a sort of run a show, an idea of what we're going to talk about. And we were just literally talking yesterday about the news that we wanted to talk about. And we're going to try to keep it to the sort of top 3 news stories that making us think for the week. But just one day later, when we're filming this on Friday, we've had a few different things pop up on the radar. But before we go into the news headlines, Isaac, how are you doing this week?
I'm good. I'm in the middle of America doing a family reunion, spending time with the people. It's a beautiful day in paradise, so I'm thankful to be on the podcast. How are you, brother?
I am good. It's been another hectic week. I think I'm just going to keep saying that for the next few weeks. Here in Connecticut, my day job has been good, productive, like good problem to have, but insanely busy. And then trying to keep up with all the news on top of that and all the other stuff, book stuff, a whole bunch of other stuff. It just gets to be a lot. And by the time I get to like this point on Friday afternoon, I am definitely ready for the weekend. But
absolutely,
it's also finally spring is starting to get here. And like I'm looking forward to some longer hikes out in the woods with Patty.
Absolutely.
Cool. So now we checked in, the 3 sort of headline news that definitely caught my eye mostly in the last 24 hours is the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, has been fired or resigned or whatever the proper terminology for that is. I think that one's interesting from my perspective because she has probably been the most vocal sort of attack. I don't want to say the phrase I was about to say, but she's been the most vocal in attacking Trump's political opponents, especially with all of her appearances on the Hill. She had the president's back, it seemed like at every step and turn, to the detriment of what a lot of people thought, I think. And yet, I guess that wasn't enough. But we don't really know yet, at least while we're recording this, why she was let go. In addition to her being let go, and this gets to sort of highlight number 2, some very senior leaders in the Army were all of a sudden they just resigned or they were let go, or again, not sure what the proper terminology is. But that, especially while there's military operations going on, very unusual. We don't, I think, have the full story on that yet. And the third news, and this is one where my heart really goes out to people, U.S. fighter jet down, search going on. You know, it's as much as we can certainly and should, by the way, I think, debate what our country is doing on our behalf and other countries and how we're using our military. At the end of the day, like the men and women who signed up to serve our country are some of our best. And for them to be shot down somewhere in Iran, be searching for them, not knowing how that's going to go out. But definitely thoughts and prayers go out to everyone involved. It's dangerous work. And I hope that gets resolved in a way and those folks get to come home soon. So those are the sort of 3 things. We didn't talk about any of those when we talked yesterday, but in the last 24 hours, those all caught my attention. What caught your attention?
To add to that, I think the President of the United States, I believe it was 2 nights ago, came out and at 9 p.m. Eastern time addressed the nation for the first real time, I feel like, since the Iran war has developed, for 15 minutes, and just kind of laid out his perspective on how he sees the direction of the war, the timeline of the war, his expectations for the allies, why he feels confident in what he did. So um, that was really a chance to hear from him on, I don't really take a lot away when he's doing question and answers from the press, because they're constantly hitting him with questions that make him irritated, or he doesn't want to answer, or he gets annoyed that they even asked it. So um, it seemed like he stayed on script and he delivered the message that he wanted to deliver. Did you get a chance to see it?
I have not gotten a chance to see it. That's on my watch list of things to watch. I
Oh,
just haven't gotten into it yet.
sure. So that's the reason I bring that up, is because I know we talked about this episode of the podcast really looking at the economy. And the first thing I think about when the president is addressing the nation and the world as it relates to this new conflict in Iran, I think about the economy, and I think about the ripple effect of our president's words. I think about the stock markets kind of over the last couple weeks reacting and overreacting to the kind of seesaw effect of um, what happens when a world leader says, we've won, we're winning, but we're also going to engage in the next couple of weeks the most heavy hitting, most powerful point of the war as far as damage done to the enemy. You can tell that oil prices, markets, economists, people from every walk of life are trying to make sense of the messaging, right? And the direction what direction our country's taking. So
Yeah.
I think that given everything that's happening in the world, there is a lot of people wondering what is happening. What does it mean for my dollar? What does it mean for my life, for my family's savings account, for my house's value, the mortgage rates? There's people at the Fed, there's people in major banks, there's real estate agents, there's people in hospitality, there's people trying to plan out a vacation. So with everyone across the spectrum of how they're looking at the economy of America and the world, um, do you mind if I dive into the questions that I have for you?
I'm happy to, but before we do, I just want to let everyone know, as
Yeah.
imperfect as the camera is, Patty is here with us, and she is snoozing right now. So if she gets a little more rambunctious, we will pull her up to be part of this
She looks
conversation. But for
busy.
right now,
She
she is
looks
doing her
busy.
job well. Absolutely.
Holding
And
it
I will
down.
definitely work on the camera angle to get a little better camera angle, so it's not her little defilade dog bed position. But with that being said, I always think, at the end of a rough week, they always say, if you're going to be involved in politics, get a dog. If you want a friend, if you want to have a friend in life, get a dog.
Is
But
that what they say?
that's what they say. But yeah, with that being said, let's get into it. What do you got?
All right. Well, we keep seeing headlines saying inflation is cooling, but people
Yeah.
still feel squeezed. Why, and from your perspective, is the cost of living so high for normal families?
Yeah. I think there's three things everyone needs to know. The first is the way that inflation gets talked about today is generally as a rate of change. What does that mean? It means that when we're talking about inflation, we're really talking about these prices this year compared to the same prices last year. What if you zoom out over a year or two, the price increases that everyone experienced coming out of COVID are still in effect. Prices haven't gone back down, right? So when they say inflation is cooling, it just means the how expensive stuff is getting isn't getting more expensive faster, but it's still getting more expensive. And oh, by the way, there was that sort of coming out of COVID 15 to 20-ish, like there was a huge increase that everyone was complaining about at the time. That hasn't really gone away for most goods. So it's really what we're talking about, even though the rate of change may or may not be getting worse or getting better, it's still, everything is still getting more expensive. With that being said, and this is the second point, you really have to look at inflation, I think, from the perspective of what that actually means for someone buying stuff. And inflation is really just, are goods getting more expensive? Is your purchasing power getting less powerful? How far does your dollar go or not go is really what we're talking about. And the other part of that equation is, are wages going up at the same rate? Because at the end of the day, prices are going up, but what you're earning is going up at exactly the same rate. So if prices go up by 3%, if what you're earning per hour goes up by 3%, the price will look different, but it won't feel different. The reason why things are feeling so different, and it's not just this year, it's the last several years, is because prices have been increasing by a lot and wages have not nearly kept pace or anywhere close. And if you zoom out even longer, if you zoom out to like the last 40 years, that has been a story for like 40 years. And we're just getting to the breaking point. And so there's nowhere else for Americans to go other than they just can't buy as much as they used to. For a while it was, and maybe we'll get into this in a minute, but for a while it was, all right, my 1 40-hour a week job couldn't support the family anymore. So got a part-time job, or my significant other got a job. Then it became, well, now we have 2 full-time jobs, and then one of us got a part-time job. Then it became, we both have 2 full-time jobs, and we're going to go into debt with credit card and mortgages and all this stuff to make ends meet. So all that to say, the real source truth that's underlying all of that is people wages have not kept up with the rate of inflation, and that has been true for quite a while. And that's why it feels different than what our parents or grandparents' generation would have been talking about inflation. Then the third point, because I said that there was 3 points, is inflation, I think, is only half the story. So when we say the word inflation, the textbook definition of that is about domestic, how far the US dollar goes in our own domestic market and here in the US. If market or goods in the US get to be more expensive, like that's inflation. It's really a inside the US thing. You also have to look at the value of the dollar internationally, and that is driven by supply and demand. And things that drive demand, so would drive the value of the dollar up, would be things like trade in oil, for example, would drive the dollar up. So when that trade goes down, the value of the dollar goes down. And you can say, hey, what does that have to do with me here? Well, the other things that decreases the value of the dollar, things like trade disruptions, like tariffs and all this other stuff we've been hearing about. And a good chunk of everything we make here in America, somewhere in the supply chain, comes a good or a component from somewhere else in the world. I forgot what the exact number is, but it's virtually everything we make here has some foreign component to it. Right. And so for almost everything you buy here, that even the stuff that's quote unquote made here, if the dollar, the value is less, and you have to buy those foreign components to go into your car, into your computer, into even the groceries that you buy, right? If the value of the dollar doesn't go as far, then your entire supply chain gets more expensive, not because those things are necessarily more expensive to produce, but because the dollar just isn't worth as much. And so when you look at all the oil disruption and the price of oil and all that going up, when you look at how the market's reacting, when you look at all of that, I think it really kind of nets out to the dollar's struggling. And last year in 2024 or 2025, I forgot which year it was actually, but it decreased from like 10 to 12%. And most people don't know that. Does that make any sense? It's a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of talk about rents hitting new highs. And the first question is, what's driving that? And what does it mean for younger or working class people trying to get stable housing?
I really think there are a couple things driving rents. Well, maybe we'll just keep it to the 3 big things. One, there isn't enough supply for the demand of people out there. And we specifically don't have enough supply of sort of entry-level homes, the sort of apartments that people would typically get right out the bat. There just isn't enough of it to go around, and the demand keeps increasing, so the cost goes up. The second thing is, I haven't seen the stats on this recently, a good chunk of new home sales, or the homes being sold every year, are now being bought up by institutional investors. So if you're out there on the market and you want to buy a home, first home, if you're moving, whatever the case may be, you're not just competing against your sort of like couple who's a neighbor for you and your significant other or whatnot. You're competing against Wall Street banks and they can afford to pay more quicker with better closing terms than most people can, because it's an investment for them. They don't necessarily care if it's a fraction of a percent more. You probably care an awful lot because your mortgage will be significantly different. So that's a big chunk of it. And then the third thing is, and this is a genuine thing that isn't just market driven, it's the cost. And no one wants to pity landlords by any means, but with all of the increase in natural disasters, in just look at Hawaii over the last couple of years, there was Maui fires, or fires on Maui a couple of years ago. Now there's flooding on Oahu, things that never typically happened before. We got really lucky this last hurricane season, but we've been having pretty big hurricanes. The fires in California, all of this stuff drives the overall insurance market up, and every home in America basically has to have insurance. And if your insurance costs go up, then the landlord's going to turn around and increase the rent to recoup their costs. So there's a few different things that are going on. I think those are probably the big three things. The insurance costs going up for landlords. No one's really going to pity them too much. I get it. The Wall Street investment institutions being a part of the market, which is a relatively new thing. And then just the overall not enough supply and more demand.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, we can solve the first one pretty easily. We could solve the second one pretty easily. Natural disasters, a little harder to solve.
I know, just for perspective for the listener, I know in Los Angeles, just a simple 1 or 2 bedroom apartment for rent is $2,500 to $3,000 normally.
Yeah.
It's not lost on me that in Los Angeles, rent just to have a simple little box is a couple $1,000s, and that's nothing fancy. And you start getting into wanting a 2 or 3 bedroom home, with a bathroom or two and a front yard and a backyard in Los Angeles, you're looking at, between $3,000 and $5,000 very easily. And, it's not lost on me that people will brag that back in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, they were buying these homes for 12 to 25 to 50 grand. And now these homes are 800 grand and, 1.2 million, and nothing, some of them are 50-year-old homes, got a ton of stuff that are going to be a challenge. But when you talk about the rents going up and people, it's not lost on me that we have not seen the surge in minimum wage that matches what the price of living costs and what housing costs. So I think it's interesting to watch the American people try and juggle trying to purchase and live the American dream while also not making that much money. I guess my question to you is, when I say everything I just said about prices, and I know Los Angeles is a whole different animal from the rest of the country, but do you have anything that you want to add, or can I hit you with the next question?
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to add, because your conversation really made me think, one of the reasons why I put in my book the sort of what our grandparents' generation was experiencing when they turned 30 versus what our parents' generation versus what like someone entering the workforce at about the 30-year-old, not entering the workforce, entering the prime of their earning years. And just one stat here, since we're talking about housing, for our grandparents, roughly, when they were turning 30, like prime of their working years, their median individual income for the entire country was $37,900. The median home price was $65,300. So a little less than double their actual salary was what they were paying for these homes. For someone entering the workforce or turning 30 in 2024, their median individual income at that age is about $44,100. So it's gone up, but not by a ton. The median home price in the country, $420,000. So I just say that to say, oftentimes our parents or grandparents' generations who have lived longer than we have and are trying to offer sort of financial advice, I would just say for everyone listening to this, know that they grew up in a very different economy. Their advice may or may not make sense for where you and or I are at. And I don't know if all of them realize that. And so just when you kind of hear the older generation say, oh, buy the home, work hard, like that's your best investment ever. That was almost certainly true for them. Like those homes are being sold. If they bought something when they turned 30 for $65,000 on median, it's worth $400,000. That's not a bad investment. I don't know if that's true now moving forward. So just not financial advice, but just something to consider.
Sure. I always use the example, what is it like for a firefighter and a school teacher to come up with, for an $800,000 home, to come up with 200 grand as a 20% down for a purchase of a home? I don't know a lot of people. I don't know anyone that just has hundreds of thousands of dollars just sitting somewhere, unless they get handed to them from family. Not everyone has just a 20% to throw down on a 5, 6, 7, $800,000 home.
Yeah, it's real.
When it comes to debt and household pressure, I keep seeing stories about the Americans hitting record credit card debt. What does that actually tell us about the economy?
It can tell us a couple things. It tells us that people still want or need to buy things and they don't have the income to buy them right now, but they need them right now. So they go and use their credit cards to buy them. That tells me that the sort of consumer-based economy we have is not as healthy as the sort of quarterly balance sheets these companies are producing show. And at some point, there will be a reckoning for it. The other thing it tells me, or what it could tell me, is that we really have a serious problem with financial literacy in this country, in addition to like people trying to really make their stuff work. I don't know what side of that is really for everyone else out there, like what side you're on, but boy, the sort of buy now, pay later schemes, the credit card interest rates, you end up paying so much money if you can't just pay it off before you start accruing interest. And the thing I worry about, and I know people in my own life that I'm really thinking about specifically, that didn't understand that for a good part of their life, that how much more expensive is a pair of shoes or whatnot if you actually do minimum payments. It ends up being a ton more money. So sort of how purchasing power works, how interest rates work, I'm not trying to sit here and blame anyone for the decisions they make. I just think we also owe it to everyone in this country to take financial literacy way more as a critical part of our education paths, and also for adults who never got it. And that I think means, the sort of how to save for retirement, how to use compounding interest in your advantage. So, in terms of the saving side of it, not the credit card spending side of it. But all that to say, the amount of education you have and all that doesn't really matter if you're really having to make decisions of absolute necessities and you just don't have enough money to go around. I forgot what percentage of Americans, I think it's over half, don't have enough money saved away for like a $500 surprise, a flat tire that needs to get towed somewhere, a medical bill you didn't see coming, all of that stuff, absolute necessities. And I suspect that's probably driving more of consumer debt than what most people think. But it's something to pay attention to. It's definitely a warning sign for the health of the economy overall.
Absolutely. Always enjoy your perspective, brother. You kind of touched on the buy now, pay later mindset, which obviously is exploding. Why do you think so many people are relying on it? And do you think that is a sign of economic distress?
I think it absolutely is a sign of economic distress. It'll be interesting to get more data, and I can spend this next week and go look for some of it. And what people are buying with buy now, pay later, it is getting to be sort of everywhere all the time. But I also think it's a sign that these companies don't understand how distressed people are, or they're just responding to the incentive structures they have. What do I mean by that? I really mean these US companies who are offering the buy now, pay later stuff, for anything that's not absolutely essential, if they can see their own consumer data, how many consumers are doing that, and then look at how much profits are making off of it, I do wonder how many of them would actually just say, maybe if we just charge less for this, more people could keep buying it over and over again. So all that to say, our entire economy from the 1980s till now has largely been based on this idea that we just need to maximize profits at all costs. Well, the problem with that is you genuinely run out of people with enough purchasing power to be able to purchase at those levels. So at some point, these companies are going to need to realize this isn't sustainable. We as a society need to realize it's not sustainable and then do something about it. But I also don't see in the sort of current political conversation at the national level and how much craziness is coming out, no one that I see is really driving this conversation anymore. How to make life more affordable. The presidential campaign was all about it. I haven't seen a whole lot of action to follow. And that is definitely also concerning because at the end of the day, people in the market are going to do what they try to do, which is maximize profits. That's the system we have now. We'd love to change some rules about it, but that's the system we have now.
Yep.
We need more government guardrails to start keeping people a little more safe in that and have it be a little bit more fair. And I don't think we don't see any of that debate happening right now.
It's true. If headlines say that the job market is strong, but a lot of people are really insecure at work, what's the disconnect?
So there's a couple disconnects. A couple disconnects being the type of jobs that are being offered, where they're being offered, and whether or not they actually offer a living wage. Let's take each one as they come. What type of jobs are being offered? If I'm in the middle of re-listening to Empires of AI, and a bunch of white-collar people who are losing their jobs because of AI are on the market for a long, long time, the job market, that is. And then they end up finding jobs training AI to take other people's jobs. But those jobs are soul-sucking. They're crushing, and they don't pay a whole lot. Some of those jobs, or some jobs in tech or whatnot, you need to be in different parts of the country. You may not be able to uproot and go do those jobs. I know here in Connecticut, so that's one thing, like where the jobs are physically at and whether or not people want to do them. The second thing is, where are they? Well, I'm getting confused. Where are they physically at? I already touched on that. Living wage. At the end of the day, here in Connecticut, one of the biggest job openings we have is for a CNA. I think it's certified nurse assistant. Doesn't earn a living wage. You can't do that job for 40 hours a week and be able to pay all your bills. And so we have all these job openings, but there's job openings because it just doesn't pay enough. And then we have big companies like Walmart. Quite literally, you can be a full-time employee and still be in earning poverty benefits like SNAP benefits and whatnot. I think that should be illegal. But those are a ton of jobs that are available out to people. And if people are choosing not to take them, it's probably not because they don't want to work. It's probably because they don't pay enough for it. I just think it should be illegal in this country to have a full-time job and still be in poverty, to the point where you're getting government assistance like that, especially for companies who are earning a whole bunch of profit every year. That's socialism, but it's socialism for the corporation where they're getting government benefits to pay for their workers.
Right. Mind if I keep hitting you with questions?
Let's keep doing it.
When wages are up on paper, but people say they don't feel richer, how can both be true?
Both can be true because it's all about the rate of change. If your wage went up by 1%, but all your costs went up by 30%, are you better off? No, but your wages are still up. And oh, by the way, I could tell you, I am definitely looking at healthcare costs are rising by somewhere between 14 and 30%. And I'm using that stat pulled out of a whole bunch of town education budgets and what they're paying for healthcare for their employees. The cost of gas has gone up recently. Everyone needs gas to get around, or gas or diesel is used in trucks to get the goods to the stores where you need to buy it from. All these costs are going up, generally speaking, at faster rates than wages. So that's why your wages are going up, but it feels like you're poorer because you are comparatively. Also, by the way, if you have your money in a sort of checking or bank account and they earn a fraction of a percent, you're losing money to inflation every single year. Again, not financial advice, but it's sort of a rate of change conversation.
Right. All right. There's a lot of news about AI replacing jobs. What's actually happening right now? and which workers will feel it first?
So what's actually happening right now is a bunch of companies around the country have been laying off workers with the promise that AI would take over their jobs.
Right.
What is very experimental, and by the way, a lot of those job losses are real. So people have already lost their jobs because of this. You see it in headlines all the time. What's interesting is that the actual opportunity of AI in a lot of these companies is actually experimental. So some of these companies actually produce more work than the workers that they're letting go, because the AI slop that the workers that remain have to deal with goes up. The productivity expectation for the workers that remain goes up. The other thing is, it is really easy for companies to let go entry-level workers, or to just not hire entry-level workers for a few years or a quarter or two, whatnot, expecting AI to do a bunch of this entry-level work. And if you look at the job market that a lot of the young folks are entering, last year, high school graduates who aren't, in post-secondary and whatnot, who just entered the job market, I saw a stat yesterday at a presentation. It was like only 30% of them have even found any sort of employment. The entry-level job market is atrocious right now. They have double the unemployment rate than the rest of the country by age group. It is wild. And I don't think enough people are paying attention to it because they're the first jobs to go. But how much longer AI will keep getting smarter and better at what it does? And then at what point can it do the manager's job? And then point can it do the supervising manager's job? At what point can it do everyone's job? And that's where I think we as a country really need to start talking about, what role do we want AI to play? And what role do we want humans to play? I think this idea that you hear from the AI world that just says, well, everyone gets to be an entrepreneur, and now you can just vibe code your own company and whatnot. Not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone has the skills to be an entrepreneur. And honestly, our system isn't set up for a whole bunch of independent entrepreneurs out there. It's just not made for it. So all that to say, the AI job market impacts are absolutely real. They're already happening. I expect it is going to get worse before it gets better.
I know I shared with you, and I was going to wait till the end, but since we're talking about it now, I recently, a couple days ago, in theaters right now, there is a new film called the AI documentary, or How I Became an Apocalyptimist. And it is one gentleman who is a documentary filmer or film director. He finds out that he's going to have a baby, and he goes on this journey just trying to understand what's coming down the pipeline, and sitting down some of the most brilliant people in the AI space to ask them the questions that everyone else is kind of worried about, thinking about, and then eventually gets to a point in the film where he's able to ask, these people driving the AI evolution and research and development, what do they think about it? How do they look at it? And I just think it's really, I hugely recommend that anybody that's curious to understand what's coming down the train tracks with AI, go watch this documentary at your convenience. But that leads me again to another question I have for you, Chris, and I appreciate you sharing. I know that you're not saying you know it all, and we're not on this podcast, we're not trying to claim that we've figured it all out, but here it is: housing and mortgage rates. Housing and mortgage rates. Mortgage rates have been all over the news. How do high rates affect working class families who want to buy a home?
Yeah. So I think it's important to put some context here, because high rates are high compared to recent norms. They're still not super high compared to historic norms. By that, I mean, coming out of 2008 financial crisis, basically central banks lowered the interest rate that they were charging other banks, which ultimately has the actual trickle down effect of lowering interest rates all around. And when they lowered them to near zero, if you bought a home sometime in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, you're actually, some of those loans have interest rates that are less than inflation. So you're actually making out pretty well with them. That all sounds hyper technical. Once the Fed started raising interest rates to try to get inflation under control, then all of a sudden the interest rate you have to pay to borrow money to buy a home, i.e. a mortgage, then becomes a higher interest rate that you're paying. And so when you go from an interest rate of like 2.5 or 2.75 that some people were paying a few years ago, and all of a sudden you're up to a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8% rate, that feels like a lot. Some of those homes that were bought and sold a long time ago were, 10, 15, 20% interest rates, but most of their mortgages were like 10-year mortgages because actual, it's what I said a couple minutes ago, which is our grandparents' generations were able to buy homes for like double their annual income. So you're able to pay that loan off in just a few years. And banks got smart. They extended out the loans to 30-year fixed loans and try to lower the interest rates, lower your monthly payment. You end up paying way more interest, which makes them money at the end of the day. And so what does that actually mean for someone who's on the house market? Maybe they're growing a family, maybe they want to move. Well, it means that the amount of money that you will pay over the lifetime of that loan for the same amount of money you're borrowing goes up. And so for most people, it just prices them out of some homes that they would want to buy. That's fundamentally what it does. It just makes everything that you're buying more expensive, not because the home is more expensive, but because the bank is getting more over time of that money.
Sure. I'm processing what you're sharing, and I'm thinking about the questions I have, but I do know that for many years, the idea that parents were sharing with their kids is, you are going to follow my model, you are going to go to college and get a degree, and then once you leverage that degree to get a good paying job and consistently get in the door with a company, then you show that company loyalty, that company pays you a career salary. Over time, you leverage that to show the banks that you can get into a house, and then you really start to stack your money by just watching that value of that home go up. And there's just no way that that can ever change. That this is the model, this is how you do it, it works. And I really think about 2008 being the first time that we as Americans realize, what happens when housing prices stop going up, and this perfect model of profit and money stacking changes. If anything changes in the model, what happens when no one wants to buy your house, or when interest rates go up so high that no one feels like selling their house, or it's just so many interesting things I learned since 2008 by just looking over the shoulder of what happened and understanding that, in a way, although some may not want to agree with it or don't like me saying it, that we as Americans got greedy and we started deciding we're going to live a life we couldn't afford at the smallest, simplest level of just buying a home, but that also the banks got greedy and decided we're going to start funding and letting people live a lifestyle they can't afford, and we're going to make so much money on the interest rate we won't care that it breaks them. And obviously that model's not sustainable. So it's very interesting to me to see that since 2008 and those lessons learned, there's still a whole new generation of parents and grandparents that are claiming that this is the safe, duplicable model that young people should be, adopting as they start out in their lives.
Well, I think I'll push back a little bit and say I think you forgot a big chunk of that, which is in 2008, one of the lessons learned is the government agencies that were meant to be sort of monitoring all of this also were asleep at the wheel. And oh, by the way, the regulations to stop that from happening, to sell all these crappy mortgages and whatnot, weren't as strong as maybe people thought they should be, or they definitely weren't as strong as they should have been. And then after 2008, learned that lesson, nearly collapsed the entire global economy. We actually, as a country, passed laws to put some more safeguards in and whatnot. Most of those laws have already been repealed.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things, we just sat here through a whole bunch of economic questions. And if you're still listening, thank you. Because economics can be a bit dry, but at the end of the day, it has a lot of power to collapse entire economies if you get it wrong. And oh, by the way, whether you think you should have big government, small government, whatever, government functionally needs to provide rules for the game. And when government is asleep at the wheel, the rules become incredibly unfair. It's just people with resources dictate whatever it is, and greed takes over, and then it falls in on itself at some point, and you can't predict when that is. And the other thing I would say, yeah, 2008 was probably the first time the conventional wisdom of home prices always go up was really questioned. But at the micro level and each individual housing market, that could happen all the time. And I don't think that gets talked about enough. And I'll say, as someone who lived outside of DC, if you have an administration come in and fire hundreds of thousands of federal workers, and all of a sudden not as many people need to live in DC, that's going to have a price impact on those homes around DC, at least for a short-term effect. So there's always a sort of short-term, long-term, what happens in your one little housing market versus the nation at large. But I think your larger point is still spot on, right? It's the conventional wisdom. You work hard, get a good paycheck, buy a good house, watch the value of the house go up, isn't guaranteed anymore. It's just not.
I think to your point, I think people can have differences of opinion on social matters, but I've often heard people ask them, "Oh, are you a Republican? Are you a Democrat?" And they'll very politely say, "Well, I'm fiscally conservative, but I'm socially liberal," or they'll have some, mixed match of those words. And I very much respect that some people don't want to be boxed into the left or the right or a political party. But what I do know is that no matter where you fall on the spectrum of politics, that the midterms and Americans' most driving focus is the value of the dollar, the economy, the price of gas, the price of everything else, the price of homes. Is the housing market sustainably, providing an opportunity for them to make a move? I know since the rates were so low during COVID of mortgage rates, there's been a ton of people that have just been holding off and not selling their homes and then buying some other home because they'll never get the interest rate that they have of 0 or 1 or 2 or 3% that they got during the COVID era. And that leads to, the president encouraging the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates, but the Federal Reserve has been hesitant to lower interest rates too quickly in an effort to make sure that it doesn't trip up the economy. And it's very interesting. You have all of these brilliant minds, but at the end of the day, I see them trying to almost puppeteer or tinker with something that, it's not perfect. There's no right answers always, and that it is almost an idea. The economy is an idea, and that can be impacted by black swan events or things that come out of the blue, like a war with Iran or the Strait of Hormuz closing. That these things change and cause a ripple on the markets in a way that nobody can foresee ahead of time. But then once it happens, it's very easy to go, "Oh, yeah, 20% of the world's energy suddenly not going out into the world, that is going to have a ripple." And what I don't think people understand is it takes time for these things to hit the markets or to hit the price of things. Ships not leaving the Strait of Hormuz over this last 30 days, I believe in the next 3 to 6 months, we may see the wave of impact that has on the rest of the world, where, yeah, our gas has gone up $1 or so at the pumps, but I don't think it's just gasoline that gets impacted by these changes or these events. I think it's going to be, as you've said, and we've talked about, the price of everything. So I don't know. I don't know how much, or do you have anything you want to add or say when it comes to what's going on?
I would say this, and you just said some things come out of the blue, and that's absolutely true. The war with Iran did not just come out of the blue. It's something that our leaders decided to do.
Sure.
And it's interesting to me because, and you also said earlier in this podcast that the president gave remarks about the war with Iran finally, which I haven't watched. I will watch it. But fundamentally, the job of the president is to make good decisions that has to balance a whole bunch of different things: the economy, national security, what's good for people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. and he has to communicate it. And the fact that we're, over a month into this war with Iran, and there has been more sit downs, it's always been off the cuff remarks and whatnot. I just think he's failing at communicating what he's doing, why he's doing it. And I really struggle to see how he's effectively balancing all the different interests that we as a country have. And it just seems like him and his team are just in over their heads right now. I hope that's not the case because of how many lives are on the line, how many American service members are deploying right now and whatnot. But boy, like fundamentally, that job is a hard job. And I just worry that from everything we're seeing right now, I mean, we just talked about the economy for like a half hour and we just scratched the surface of it.
Sure.
Like, but all this stuff of like, hey, if you go to war with Iran, they're going to close the Strait of Hormuz is like pretty predictable at the end of the day.
Sure. Not a surprise.
Yeah,
you're right. Okay, well then here's a question for you. Why are groceries and insurance going up faster than almost everything else? What are behind these price spikes?
So insurance, I think, is a lot of the sort of natural disaster stuff.
Of course.
Right? If there's floods and fires in Hawaii, fires in California.
Those insurance companies politely pass on the increase in cost to the customer.
I'm not sure if I would say politely, but they definitely pass it on. Which, fine. Oh, by the way, I don't know what the history is for sort of property insurance, but most people don't know before the 1980s, the healthcare insurance industry in this country was largely nonprofit. And then in the 1980s, we switched to a for-profit healthcare insurance system. And so not only do you have the overhead cost of the insurance, you also have all the profits for the shareholders, which isn't really going to help anyone's actual healthcare. But that's besides the point. The grocery stuff, I think, is a little more complicated. Still some natural disaster stuff plays in there for sure. But this is also where you start to get into, to get food from where it's grown to your table, it takes quite the journey that requires diesel, it requires oil, it requires plastics are an oil-based product, by the way. I don't know if people knew that. And most of the food gets wrapped in some form of plastic and all that stuff. And oh, by the way, when you realize that a good chunk, I don't know what the exact number is, of our agriculture workers are people with what this administration would probably call questionable immigration status. And then you go target all of them and now they can't work. And oh, by the way, I know from farmers in my neck of the woods that they try to hire Americans and try to offer like going rates and just can't find Americans who want to work in that industry for almost any amount of money. It's hard work. And so when you have to start paying a lot more for the labor that you were paying less for, I'm not saying that the fact that farmers were paying less for immigrants to work was fair, but it was certainly built into the price model. And when you have to start paying more for that, then all the price of groceries are going to go up. So again, this kind of gets to the point I was saying of these are pretty standard like outcomes of policy decisions that are getting made at the national level,
Right.
at least for the price of groceries. So for an administration who ran on making things more affordable and bringing grocery prices down, it really feels like they're making all the decisions to make them go up. And that's something
Sure.
I really can't understand. And I'm someone, as much as I think anyone listening to this podcast will know, I'm not a Trump fan. I'm just not. But I try to understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, to learn. Like, you can learn from people you disagree with. You can learn a lot from people you disagree with. And most of the time, I can understand what people that have different political views than I do, why they got there, or why certain decisions get made, even if I disagree with it. These decisions that are leading to these increase in prices right now for groceries and oil and gas, I really don't understand. I just don't.
You bring to mind a quote that I once heard, and I don't know whether it's true or not, but I heard the quote that Donald Trump is the orange grenade that Republicans can throw into the laps of the Democrats and watch them squirm.
Interesting quote. All right. I don't know what to make of that. But then again, I would push back on that, though. I would say, like,
push back. Go for it, bro.
I get the quote. I get where, like, the quote is coming from. But at the same time, Donald Trump also is the, I guess, orange grenade, if we're going to use this framing, that gets thrown in the pocket of other Republicans too from time to time. Whether you're Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi,
Sure.
who else just got fired, or the Republicans that get thrown under the bus because they say like Thomas Massey is getting challenged by him just because he spoke out against him. It's kind of I don't know if it's a Democrat thing. I think it's just, I almost think of it more like the Eye of Mordor, and you just don't want to be in the Eye of Mordor.
Yeah.
Because I think here's what Trump is really good at. I think Trump is really good at creating and managing chaos. He's lived in chaos in different forms for most of his adult life, whether it's the tabloid times from the 80s and 90s to the social media time nowadays. He can more effectively manage, especially media chaos, than almost anyone else alive. I think that gets to his head a lot. And I think he can just constantly create chaos and think, I'm going to end up on top of whatever the situation is without really knowing how he's going to do it. And I think that ends up backfiring on a whole lot of people in his inner circles too.
Well, I think there's another piece to it, and that is, I think over however many years of just doing business and being him, that he decided he doesn't really care what people say or think about him. And he does want approval and respect, but he does not care if the things he says or does causes a ripple, makes people angry. And he, almost like a comedian, really enjoys dropping these really sharp, witty, almost corrosive comments into the mix. And I'm guessing his PR team for the first chapter was pulling their hair out trying to figure out how to contain the blowback, but very quickly figured out that's what his base loved. Donald Trump's base loves that he'll speak his mind. They love that he'll say stuff that may be inappropriate or that, you know, no other politician is saying. That is their proof that he is who he says he is. But like you said, I think he loves chaos. I think he's really good at chaos. If you're doing real estate in New York City in the 80s and 90s, I would argue that's the foundation of business is chaos. And whether it was the lessons he learned from there, or I don't know how much chaos there is doing a reality TV show, but I know there's chaos there as well. Just trying to film a reality show. I've got one more question for you.
Yeah.
If you had to pick an economic trend in the news right now that will shape working class life over this next year, what would it be?
The number one trend that I think
Or
will shape.
a trend?
Yeah. I think coming out of all of this, it's one of two. The price of energy, which will have effects for the price of everything else. If the Iran situation ends up actually getting resolved sometime in the near future and that goes back to normal in the next few months, then it's still just going to be overall affordability. Like the disconnect between how much people are producing at work and what they're being paid is something that we disconnected in the 80s. And we are at breaking points for millions of people, economically speaking. And if we don't do something serious soon about making people lives more affordable, that could either mean raising wages while trying to hold costs steady or decreasing costs, which usually doesn't end well. If we don't try to do something around it, I think you're going to see more and more people start to lash out against what they perceive as an incredibly unfair system. And so I would be on the lookout for affordability, but again, keep in mind that that's part cost and part wages. And if those two things don't start converging soon, watch out, it's going to get crazy.
I think, to just add my own thoughts on economics, that if you're a young person and you are 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, or even 19, 20, 21, and you are embarking on transitioning from high school life to college life, from living with your family to living on your own, and from being a student to paying for college, it's not lost on me that some of these schools out there are offering a 4-year degree for $250,000. And I know from most people I've talked to, gone to school with, that while I had the GI Bill, which helped me, and I got some scholarships, there were some people that were paying for their own college and that they were getting into massive student loan debt um, just to get a college degree. And one of the classes I took when I was at Pepperdine really kind of dived into social benefits or benefits for society, like the GI Bill, like Social Security, like Medicaid. But we really looked at, if young men and women are coming out of high school and are having to just accept and agree to 100 to 250 to 500,000 in student loans to get these really incredible college degrees, that it ends up leaving them after school with these massive monthly payments that are very similar to a mortgage payment, except there's no house. They just have a diploma, they have the experience in the school, but they're now entering into still the workforce. And they're not, it's not like someone's getting a business administration degree from Cal State Long Beach or anywhere in the country, and then going and just skipping entry level positions and jumping right into mid level management or senior level management, and going from, being a full time student to making 70 to 120 grand a year. Most of the time, even with a college degree, you're still entering the workforce and having to navigate a real job with real pay minus taxes. It's not a lot. And we studied at Pepperdine just how much impact it has when the economy is now putting young people into so much debt for college, that is causing young men to pause on even proposing to someone to get married. And
Yeah.
it's causing a young family to wait longer because of those debt payments, just even buy a home or to have a kid. And then everything is shuffling to the right in terms of what's possible, because it's not realistic in your 20s to, you know, have a family, buy a home, when you're still climbing out of what a combined two people could have easily a $500,000 in student loan debt coming out of college. So, I don't know if you want to say anything to that, but I just know that I would encourage young people today, if you are listening to this and you are thinking about getting a college degree, there are three real easy solutions that I see could help you save a lot of money. One, do your first 2 years of school at a 2 year college. What do they call them? Excuse me, a community college.
Community
If you
college.
go to a
Yeah.
community college and knock out your first 2 years, I don't know if everyone knows this, but the classes that you take at a 2 year community college are exactly the same requirement classes that you take at a 4 year school, which charges a lot more money. And you're basically knocking out math, English, science, and these required general ed classes. You can get them done for pennies on the dollar at a junior college, compared to going straight into a 4 year school and burning through those student loan debts. The next thing I would recommend, that it's not the sexiest of ideas, but when I was doing my college, it was CLEP testing. You can actually sign up for and do what's called a CLEP test, and it will be a 2 hour test for a couple hundred questions. You study for it, but if you pass that test, you can get 3 to 6 credit hours, for science or math or English, and not have to take a college course and get full credit for it. So that was another thing that really helped me when I was going through school, save some money. And then the final thing would be, if you join the military and do a couple years of military service, you can get a full GI Bill, which will then pay for up to the most expensive state school. Also, I got to recognize the pup in the frame there. Patty, how are you? You're holding it down on a Friday. Okay, very busy.
Yeah. Busy, tough life.
Chris, we're hitting an hour, and I've gotten to ask you a bunch of questions. Let me ask you, as I ramble about young people really rethinking how they approach college so that they don't get into debt given the current economy. Are there, I know I have a couple more things to share, but I wanted to push back and ask you, is there anything whether it's books, movies, or people that you would recommend studying for people to get a better perspective on the economy, on where they should invest their dollar, on how to think about education and investing in their education? What would you give someone as a couple tools for the toolbox if they're wanting to give themselves a self-education in how to navigate the economy?
I I think there are literally a ton of books and or YouTube videos and or explainers out there that would be really beneficial for people. I think trying to think of one that really jumps off the page, but like if you want to, we talked about the financial crisis, the 2008 financial crisis. There's several different books, especially the books written by people who were decision makers during it, that are impactful. There's also the Big Short movie, which is actually informative and helpful to understand what led to that. And then watch that and then go Google, hey, what happened to all these reforms to stop this from happening again? Right. There's a book, I forgot the author's name, who like basically tried to decode all of the economic language that gets used. I try to decode it when I talk. I'm not always successful at it. That's massively impactful just to understand the verbiage you're seeing. How does inflation even get calculated? How does the unemployment rate get calculated? What does the Fed actually do? We can certainly talk about it on here and people have questions about it. If you're still listening through all these economic questions, but have a specific question, throw it down below in a comment and we'll get to it at a future episode. The other books I would say though is there's a bunch of different books about the likely impacts of AI, and there's a lot of different articles being written about it. I would steer away from the sort of theoretical what AI can and can't do and actually read about just how it's impacting the workplace right now. Let me throw it back at you for a quick second while I look through my library of books on my phone.
Absolutely.
To find one that like really makes sense to just give you an actual title. Is there a book that you would point to or a movie or something that when you're thinking about economics you really look at?
It's funny you asked that, Chris. I actually had some things written down here, so I'll stall for you while you kind of put it together. So, as you touched on, The Big Short. For a lot of people that don't have the patience to read a book or have the energy or the time, I would argue that you do have 2 hours to watch a movie. We're talking about a film that was put together starring Ryan Gosling, Brad Pitt, Steve Carell, Christian Bale, and it really documents the 2008 financial housing market crisis, but from the perspective of 5 or 6 different individuals who, while everyone is saying that the housing market's good, everything's wonderful, they started digging in and looking at the data and trying to understand how is it possible that housing prices can just keep going up, that the value of homes can just keep increasing, but looking at the interest rates of what people were going to start paying and the different products that banks were offering, this movie really is valuable to me. I rewatch it all the time. And some of the reasons that I wrote down why I rewatch it all the time, it's not like I'm watching it and suddenly getting some new thing that I didn't get the last time, going, oh, wow. It's not a surprise once you've seen the movie once. There are things that it reminds me, though. It gives me perspective. It shows me that paying attention can really pay off. It reminds me that it's not what everyone says or thinks, it's what the data shows and what the data is saying, and that might be a totally different result than what everyone wants to scream and shout. And as I watch the movie, I really enjoy as these people, these individuals, kind of navigate trying to figure out how to invest and to use their dollar when they know that there's eventually going to be problems on the horizon. Throughout the movie, there are people that laugh at them, scream at them, ridicule them, joke at them, just basically demean them for being foolish enough to even suggest that the housing market could ever be a bubble, could collapse, that there's anything wrong with it. And I really just enjoy that throughout the movie, these different individuals, um, they know what they know, and they know what their truth is, and they figured it out enough that they decide we're gonna place our bets given what we know, and it actually paid off for them, while everyone else at the end is going, I can't believe this. In the stock market, Wall Street, the big banks, the president of the United States, everyone's scrambling to go, how come we didn't see this? And in the movie it mentions, because they didn't look.
Yeah.
So I recommend, the other thing that I highly recommend, and I'll zoom it in right here, Freakonomics. I don't know if that comes through backwards, um, but two economists, Stephen Levitt and Stephen Dubner. These guys put together, it says on the cover, Freakonomics, a rogue economist explores the hidden side of everything. And it's very interesting. The graphic is an apple, but with a sliced open wedge, revealing that the inside of the fruit is actually an orange. So what you see on the outside isn't even actually what's on the inside. Um, this book hugely helped me to realize my perspective and my outlook sometimes and many times may not even matter, that it's not how I see it or how I look at it, but once again, what the data and the truth actually is, which has nothing to do with how I look at it. And
Yeah.
so, um, I would recommend that if you're trying to navigate the waters as either a young father or mother or an investor or a college student or leaving, home for the first time and going and getting a place on your own, that Freakonomics is a wonderful book to just reevaluate how you look at the world. And I think the things I took from this book, I can't take it personally. It's just business. That's a quote that people will say, but I think it's really good with this book, looking at reality, zooming out and looking at the whole picture, exploring opposing views for value and perspective. I think it's huge, even to look at people that look at things the opposite of you, um, and to allow your perspective to be fluid, and that you can admit to be wrong and own it and change your perspective based on getting new information, that it doesn't have to be set in stone, that you know what you know. The minute you get new information that gives you better perspective, pivot, adopt it, grow. um, a couple other things that I would just throw out there before I bounce it back to you. I've been exploring silver, the precious metal, and just purchasing silver because of how many different technology instruments require it. And I just have it just seems to me like it's going to be needed in many, many ways in the future, even more so than other precious metals, or I don't know. I also bought some XRP and spent $1,200 on XRP, and I won't buy any more, but I'm watching that go up and down. So it's been fun to see what crypto does. But I would encourage people to look at purchasing raw land. And what does it look like to just get land with, I don't know how you can put a price on investing on a piece of property that has a river running through it, or a mountain range, or a well. It could be anything, but just having some raw land might be good. Two other books I'll just throw out there: Principles for Navigating the Changing World Order by Ray Dalio really helped me, and 21 Lessons for the 21st Century by Noah Yuval Harari. And those kind of just are a couple suggestions. If you've got the time and energy to read, I highly recommend them. Now, back to you. What do you have that you would recommend?
Yeah, and also if you don't have the time or energy to read, if you have the time that you're driving to listen to an audiobook is also a totally reasonable way to do this as well. It's how I do a lot of it. And Ray Dalio's book is really good. The Freakonomics book is really entertaining and good. And the what was the last one you just rattled off?
21 Lessons for the 21st Century.
21 Lessons for the 21st Century. Also, his other book, Homo Dios, are all really good. The book I was thinking of is actually called In This Economy, How Money and Markets Really Work by Kayla Scanlon. She is a content creator, economist who actually breaks this stuff down kind of all day, every day. She also, I think you can find her on social media and whatnot as a more easy way to digest some of the stuff. Because at the end of the day, the concepts, guys, aren't really that complicated. The jargon, the vernacular, the how to talk about it, the words we use to describe it, we've made it complicated. And oh, by the way, some of the more fancy market stuff that's out there like has been made complicated. But at the end of the day, the basic concepts of supply and demand aren't that complicated. So don't feel like just because you weren't taught it, you can't learn it. You can absolutely learn it. And the other thing I would say, you know, neither of us are financial experts. We can't offer financial advice, but I can tell you, and here's another book, and this one's totally self-serving, my book. I kind of, in my book, really pull the curtain back about how the economy actually works based on decisions that were made 40 years ago to get exactly the result that we have today. It is actually working exactly as it was designed by those decisions that were made decades ago. And once you understand that, I think you can see it a lot more clearly. I also think you can see possible solutions for it a lot more clearly. So my book, You Shouldn't Have to Kill to Get Ahead, definitely has a good chunk of this in it. It's not the full main idea of the book, but it's a huge chunk of it. The other thing I would say is that I really wanted to talk about the economy because so many people are hurting. And what most people, I think, don't realize, and this isn't financial advice again, but the entire economy is really set up right now to maximize profits, or really to maximize assets. Assets are things that are expected to go up in value. Land, precious metals, certain things you can buy in the stock market, as long as they're healthy companies, all assets are likely to go up in value over time. It will not necessarily happen in the short term, but in the long term, very likely to happen. And when things like dollar devaluations, which I talked about several times in the last hour, or inflation hit, those things don't lose value. So their costs go up because they retain their value. What doesn't go up at the same rate are wages. And so this entire economy, if I could sum it up in one sentence, is simply an economy that's designed to maximize the value of assets while minimizing the value of actually earning wages. And most people, I think, don't realize that. And people
Say
should
it
be pissed
again.
at that.
Say it again, just for me.
Most people don't realize that this entire economy is designed to increase the value of assets, but not necessarily increase the value of wages. So all I mean by that is if you own quality companies in the stock market, if you own some precious metals, if you own some land, those are all things that are expected to go up in value over time. So you would consider them assets. And companies are a part doing that by minimizing as much as they can what they're paying for labor, i.e., what they're paying all of us in wages. And it is almost designed to maximize the profit, therefore shareholder value, therefore stock price, while keeping at a bare minimum how much they have to pay for people's time, which is your wages.
Which ends up being where people pull their money from to buy assets.
Right. If you have extra money to go around, right? But if you don't, then you're kind of screwed. And that's where I think more and more people are waking up to the reality, hey, maybe you didn't make the best investment decision when you were 18 or 19 years old. Maybe someone in your family did get lucky a couple generations ago and you have wealth. Like the idea that you can just put your head down, work hard, earn enough money, put a little bit away, and like have a great life just doesn't exist anymore.
That's gone.
So, and that's part of the reason why I'm so passionate. And I know, like, today I'm a little bit tired, whatnot. Most weeks I'm a little tired. But at the end of the day, I'm so passionate about talking about this because the more that people can wake up to the reality of the sort of economic system we're living in and how unfair it is, the more people I think would wake up and say, we need to do it differently than it is being done today.
Absolutely. Well, we are closing out this podcast on a Friday, and it's the beginning of April 2026. I know in the past 24, 48 hours, Donald Trump, our president, has mentioned pulling out of NATO. Obviously, we've got fighter jets getting shot down over Iran, and into the Persian Gulf. And I just want to say, for everybody who is navigating the economy on the world stage, thank you to our men and women in uniform. And Chris, thank you for doing this podcast with me and hearing my suggestions and ideas and pushing back and giving me yours. I hope that everyone listening has a great weekend. And there's Patty holding it down. Patty, we appreciate you making an appearance. You're a part of this too, kid. Chris, I hope you have a great weekend.
Yeah, and you too, and the best to you and your family while you're traveling.
Thank you.
And I look forward to doing it again next week. And maybe next week we
Absolutely.
try to find a little more upbeat topic. I know the economic topic was my idea. So sorry for everyone who just sat through this entire lecture. But next week, let's find something a little more engaging and like energy bringing, because I think I'm so passionate about talking about the economy. I just want more people to understand it.
Sure.
But I also, I'm the flip side of an hour and close to an hour, 15 minutes into it. I also get it could be a bit of a drag. So
it is, you know what? It's part of our lives, whether we like it or not.
true.
What is the quote? Money rules everything around us.
Yeah.
Hey,
Unfortunately.
Chris, thank you for doing this podcast with me. Have a great week.
Yeah, you too.
If you haven't yet, please click like on this video, drop a comment below, and click that subscribe button. It'll help the YouTube algorithm make sure that these videos are getting into your feed. Thank you.